And we should be live.
Good evening, I'm Mark Masterson. I'm the Artistic Director at City Theater. Welcome to our webinar about in community conversation about PERKUP PERKUP, which is a play by Isaac Gomez that was 1 week into rehearsal when the COVID-19 pandemic hit Pittsburgh and we had to stop. We had a remarkable time in very compressed situation working on this incredible play. And frankly, for me, it was a humbling experience. It was a play, it is a play that caused me to question my own inherent biases and my own reaction to the situation that the people in the play were in. We approached it with, I think, humility and with an effort to dig into the humanity that Isaac Gomez mind in his telling of the story PERKUP PERKUP. The play is set in a small coffee shop in Elkhorn, Wisconsin, and it features a room full of people who come and go from the coffee shop, but primarily the residents of Elkhorn who frequent this coffee shop are white. And they have a visitor who comes in for the Wi-Fi. And the visitor encounters, he sets up in the corner after getting his drink, and he encounters a bunch of what we might call microaggressions at first, where people are saying things that they don't necessarily intend to sound the way they sound, but at the same time they reveal an inherent bias and a kind of attitude towards others that ultimately is damaging. As the play unfolds, the situation becomes more tense and real aggression occurs. Not to give any spoilers, but that's the story of PERKUP PERKUP. And, I think the play, Isaac would say, as he said to us, is written from a perspective of actually loving these characters and understanding their limitations. All of them, and at the same time recognizing the damage that occurs through our own inherent biases in the way they reveal themselves. So it is a play that has still not had its full world premiere, except in audio format. We hope that you've been able to listen to the audio version of the play, which honestly we put together in about a day. We pivoted from a staging rehearsal to an audio recording, and we were able to capture the rehearsal as it stood 8 days into or 7 days into our rehearsal process, and share it with you with some added sound effects and some stage directions so that everybody can get the full impact of the play as it was existing at that time. With that, we also had 2 EDI advocates who worked with us in our rehearsal process. Bridget Mullins and Cruz, and Betty and Bridget guided the cast and myself and the design team and the City Theater staff in thoughtful encounters where we were able to kind of debrief every day and think deeply about the issues that the play raised, and have what we hope to be a safe and brave workspace that we could encounter these plays, the issues of this play honestly and transparently as possible. And so I'm going to turn it over to Betty and Bridget to facilitate this conversation. I want to thank you all for joining us. We're excited to bring you this conversation, which we hope will amplify some of the issues that were raised in Isaac's play and continue the discussion in Pittsburgh. Betty and Bridget.
Sure. I think we're just going to open with the little introduction to get us started. But I'm Betty Cruz. I'm originally from Miami, Florida. I'm a part of the Latinx community, and as a first-generation Cuban American, getting to experience other parts of America once I moved out of Miami and realizing I wasn't surrounded by Latinos everywhere else that I went. It was really an honor when this opportunity came together to hear Isaac's story and how it's his personal story that's reflected in this play, and to learn more about his journey and And it was just my great honor to be able to sit alongside these amazing actors and this entire team to bring together, to bring to life a very, very real American story that happens in neighborhoods everywhere, that's rooted in the barriers and the racism that exists across our country, whether or not we realize it. And a lot of times it's these everyday interactions where it's most prevalent. And so, yeah, it was my great honor to be an advocate, and to recognize, very much stepping into this role right away, that at the end of the day, I'm still as I've shared with the group before, white presenting member of the community. So by no means do I pretend to really understand the depths of inequities that the broad Latinx community, that includes people of beautiful different races and cultures, fully experience, especially when trying to navigate America. So this story and Isaac's work and City just did an amazing contribution to address a really important issue. So I'm just excited to be here and talk a bit more about it together with our community partners. Bridget?
Yeah, hi, everyone. I'm Bridget Mullins. I was the other EDI advocate for this production, and the White Ally EDI advocate. And to echo Betty, was just incredibly honored to be part of the process, to have been able to sit with the content and questions raised in Isaac's play, and to meet all of the wonderful people who are here on the call as well. As we were getting it started, I was reminded of our very first day in rehearsal together, where our community partners here on the call were able to join as well. And just the incredible energy of that moment and the excitement around bringing this play to life, and the visceral verbal reactions to the reading of the play as it happened. And I'm just excited in this moment to be able to hopefully capture some of that and share it out with everyone listening on the call as well, and kind of dive back into it together here too. And before we got started with some of those pieces, we had talked about maybe setting some sort of grounding intentions for this call. Even as we gather in virtual space, perhaps even more so gathering in virtual space, we really want to be intentional and mindful about how we're showing up across the virtual geographies that we're in. And so we thought that we'd just offer a couple of pieces for those of us on the call, and for those of us who are not visible in the photo but listening in. And we are so glad that people called in to be a part of this, and we feel your presence and energy even though we can't see all of the faces, and just want to acknowledge that. So I'm going to send through the chat just a couple of thoughts that we want to encourage for those who are visible right now, for those who are not visible with the cameras. So just some grounding intentions, and maybe even as I read them, we can all, I can invite everyone to even just feel your own body in this moment, your feet on the ground or on your couch or in your chair or wherever you are, your breath, your heart, tap into that space. What we hope for is that we can be present and stay present with each other during this call. We know that people come into this virtual space, some with pain, some with joy, some with many layers in between in this moment that we're experiencing together. So we want to embrace our full human experience and really practice cultivating this empathetic imagination that the arts help us so much to do. This evening, we're going to encourage a lot of listening. Part of that is already facilitated by the setup of this call, but sort of tapping into an even deeper place in ourselves to encourage a lot of listening, especially if you're someone like me who has not had to fight for your voice to be heard, and to make space, a lot of space for those who have had to do that. There will be a couple of moments on this call where the folks listening in will be asked to share reactions and questions. Claire is going to be walking us through how to do that through some of the Zoom tools. And so especially for these moments where we're going to invite participation from a lot of people, just to think about how much power our words have, even in a virtual space. It's very easy to sort of quickly type and send it right away. So especially in these moments of providing reactions and questions, we're going to ask you to try to slow down, to pause, maybe notice your breath as you type your answers, as you send through your question, and try to make sure that it's coming from a really honest and open space. In addition to that, we're going to encourage you to chat with purpose. So we have the chat function open for people to type into it throughout the call. And just encourage you to send through what you might feel is really important for everyone on the call to see. There are also, private functions for other conversations, but being mindful about what is sent into the all visible chat. And then lastly, being mindful of our sort of ouch and oops moments if they arise. We think that part of cultivating and practicing brave space is naming what hurts and knowing that we won't be perfect. So if you catch yourself saying something insensitive, call it out with an oops and try again. If you're hurt by something that someone has said, practice naming it. We believe that this is part of being in a brave space together. And just lastly, to name that I think tonight is really a celebration of the bravery of sharing stories, of the bravery of Isaac sharing some of his experience through this play, and the bravery of sharing other overlapping and layering stories of those on the call tonight. So we're celebrating that bravery of sharing stories. So let's be open and real and practice showing up in new ways for one another.
Thank you so much, Bridget. Hi, as you mentioned, I'm Claire Drobot. I'm the Associate Artistic Director at City, and I'm sort of our technical facilitator, and I'll be helping to prompt us through our conversation. So first of all, to everyone who's joined, just a huge thank you, both to our community partners and to all of our attendees. We're just really grateful to be able, I think, in this moment to come together, even if it is virtually, to have a chance to talk about the story behind PERKUP, which at its heart is about community. In the case of the play, I think a broken community, but I think it's a chance for us all to create a broader conversation. And as Mark mentioned, Isaac wrote this play as a catalyst for anti-racism work. So I'm going to gladly step aside, but I just want to walk us through a couple of quick functions. So for those of you who are on the call, you'll see at the bottom of your screen, there are two things. One, you'll see a chat function, and that's where we've been posting on the side. If you want to click it, that'll show you. You can see the grounding intentions. Is also the names of all of our panelists who are participating. But then you'll also see on your right, there's a Q&A function. So if you go into the Q&A function, that will allow all of our participants, our attendees, to ask questions. So you can go ahead and type a question or type a response, and that's something that we'll all be able to see, as well as in the chat function. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to actually begin our conversation, as it were. So I want to introduce the rest of our panelists and community members. So we have both artists who are part of the production, in addition to a number of community organizations that we've worked with over the course. We worked with about 10 organizations, many of whom were at our first rehearsal initially. And these are a number of community members who've been able to join us today. So what we thought we'd kind of start with, and then we'll actually open this up as a question for the audience. So I'll type these questions into the chat function, is to have our panelists introduce themselves and also share sort of their initial reactions to the play. So the things that struck them in Isaac's words. It's a real testament to his power as a playwright. I think this story, and I feel like it elicits very strong reactions. So maybe we'll start there. I'm just gonna kind of go across our screen. So Treble, would you be up to kick us off and share a little bit about yourself, as well as your initial reaction to PERKUP PERKUP?
Yes. So my name is Treble NLS. I am a artist, activist, teaching artist, audio engineer, whatever I need to be. I work for One Hood, and To get straight to it, I felt a lot of anger when I was watching this play. It was just like, there were a lot of whoa moments. It was just like, what is going on here? But it was just like, we see that every day, you know? And it was cool to kind of see that dramatized in the way that brought it to the forefront, you know? But it's like seeing it in the forefront was just like, oh my goodness, like if this isn't true, man, because like I related to a lot of the microaggressions that he was getting in the play because, you know, me being a black male with hand tattoos, I walk into any environment and before they even see what's on my hands, it's like, I don't know what they mark me as, but it's clear that they believe I'm some kind of like negative figure. And it's like people don't realize that like your words have intentions and the direction of your words have meaning, your words have power, and like regardless of the intention, they have an impact. You know, I feel like a lot of people we as people forget the impact part of what we say and how we say it. And I feel like this play really like showed that a lot of people are ignorant of the impact that they might have on the presence of people around them, you know?
Thank you so much. I think it's a great point, and I think the way in which the play strikes everyone kind of hits in different nerves, and I feel like that raw spot is something that we talked a lot about in rehearsals. So thank you, Treble. We'll move next to Shakira Wright, who's a member of the Alumni Theater Company, which is an organization that we frequently collaborate with. And so I know that you're going to actually share a poem that will kick us off because we wanted to make sure and include art in this. So I'll invite you to jump in next.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Shakira Wright. I am an artist. I act and dance and sing, and I'm a playwright and a poet, and I work as a mentor for some of the kids in ATC and an arts collaborator and as a founding member of the company. Very proud of that. This piece that I have to read for you all today is from, I think it was ATC's show A World Without Us, and it was, I'm wondering what year I actually wrote this, and I'm not sure, but it's okay, I got it. Is my skin too dark for you? I don't know, I just don't want to make you uncomfortable. I know I'm too young to worry about this. All I think about is how I can prove to everyone I'm supposed to exist, that I shouldn't be a Trayvon or Mike Brown story, that I don't deserve to be shot down with no warning. I deserve a life that belongs to me. I want to run around parks with my friends and climb trees, but I'm worried, see? I mean, can I cry here? Will my tears help you see my humanity? Help you realize I'm just like you and you're just like me? That we have more in common, and the comment, he deserves it, hurts me so deeply. Will you remember me? Will I be remembered as a child? Or something that had to be stopped before it got too wild? Too free thinking, too liberal, too loud for you? Is my skin tone too dark for you? Is it? I asked it already, I know. Let's just revisit. I don't remember your answer. This anxiety is eating me like a cancer, like a slow-moving, fast-growing, sharp pain. Difficult to speak of because it leaves me so drained. I walk across the street and look at the ground when groups of grown white men are around. And I'm sorry. I know it's crazy. I understand how it sounds. But you don't know what it's like wondering if next time it'll be you lying on the ground, cold with stories unknown because of this tone. Is my skin tone too dark for you? I'm sorry. I'll leave you alone. Thank you. That poem was originally done by a small boy. He was small then. He's like very tall now, but at the time he was a young boy in ATC. And I love Perk Up, Perk Up. I was one of the people who was fortunate enough to be in the room in one of the readings, and it was just so, it was so honest and so realistic in a way that I think we don't see racism often when it comes to art. It's not being portrayed, I think, especially on TV and on like really huge platforms, in a way that's so direct to the way that it feels to people of color. And all of the microaggressions in the story are just, I recall being one of the people who were like, and ooh, and like when those characters were speaking in that way. And it's just, I think that it's really ingenious the way that the story kind of, it just builds in a way that's so, it's so real, but it is also almost fantasy. And I say almost because it really isn't. It's like you would think that it would be fake, these things that are being said, and the way that the story kind of arcs that way, but it's really stuff that happens all the time. And I loved it. So that was my first reaction to it.
Thank you for sharing both that poem, a round of applause, and your initial reaction. Well, also we have another Alumni Theater Company member joining us. So a warm welcome to Bridget Perdue. Bridget, if you want to share a little bit about maybe your initial reactions to the audio play, as well as your ATC story.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I am Bridget Perdue with Alumni Theater Company, ATC. And firstly, I've probably heard that poem from Shakira, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 times in combined rehearsals. And like, it's still like, I'm like so emotional listening to it. I'm just like, the whole world needs to hear that. It's so beautiful. And not just because I like you, but so yeah, I'm the music director for Alumni Theater Company, and ATC is a youth arts organization where our students create bold theatrical work that shows the experience of Black young artists growing up in Pittsburgh, and just kind of gives, shares their story. And we start, it's pretty much 6th to 12th grade, and then we have some students that continue to do work, because when you're in ATC, you don't leave. Yeah. So and ATC also does a lot of, activism and writing, as you can tell by like Shakira's poetry and stuff. My initial reaction to Perk Up, Perk Up, I think just the beginning of the play for the beginning was like, it's like, something's coming, but everything is so light on the surface that it, and wanting to be benign and not wanting to step on toes and all of this apology and stuff. And I think what is so brilliant about the writer, but like also low-key upsetting for me, is like the humanity that's shown in in a lot of the white characters. Because it's like, these are people who, are struggling or are, having the best go at life, or are varying degrees of, success or whichever. There's a very much humanized component to that. And I think that's what makes the play so brilliant, is that it is very human and it is very realistic with, flawed characters and such, just kind of like living their lives. Yeah, I did feel very like angry and blown away as the play progressed, and definitely has a very high incline kind of an arch, and just I don't know, the reality of it all is so, the fact of the matter just being that to be Black in America, like the microaggressions, or to be a person of color in America, the microaggressions are so ongoing, and you know, oh, it's okay, like the placating that you are forced to do to exist in this world is so exhausting and so draining. And I don't know, I just really identified with Pedro in that character.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that and for joining us today. And rounding out our panel, we also have two cast members who are joining us on our panel. So first I'd love to introduce Lisa Felton Smith, who, if you've listened to the audio play, reads the role of Tori.
Hi. It's good to see everyone, especially since the first day. When I read Perk Up, Perk Up, it scared the bleep out of me. And I knew that this was going to be a very scary play to do. And that was incredibly important for me to do. I'm going to use me as a sort of representative of a generalization, but I know that white folks tend to want answers to EDI questions, right? What should I do? What should I say? As if this discourse is a is a right or wrong conversation. I was going to say black and white, and even that. So what this working on this play and these characters, what Isaac has done is he's created a conversation for the audience to engage in, to show the complexities of it, to show how damaging not being empathetic towards someone else's journey can be. I will say that also as an actor that's been in Pittsburgh for a while, I was actually interested that maybe I could bring something that could shine light on an issue that someone might say, oh, I identify with Lisa. And then perhaps say, yeah, okay, we can all mess up. We can all be, we all have biases, quite frankly. And I'm going to throw myself into that because I'm not pure, I'm not perfect. So to be really transparent about that. And I was really grateful to be able to be in a room full of smart, empathetic, creative artists, the community members that they have brought on board. I'm sitting here listening, and I'm really grateful to be a part of this conversation. And as someone who educates young people and encourages them to find the right to speak and to free their voices, this play, and I'm really devastated that we didn't get to be able to bring it to an audience to learn more. This was an important part in, I felt like being an advocate for my students whose voices have been shut down.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that, Lisa. And then rounding out our panel, a warm welcome to Sam Turek, who is also a cast member from our audio play, or not audio play, from the production, who read the role of Jeff. So welcome, Sam.
Hi, thanks. Thanks. It's really great to see everybody's face. To talk about the first reaction that I had to the play, it felt like a bomb, and I was really interested in being a part of the team that would deliver that bomb to really to white people. I know that theater audiences in Pittsburgh and in the US generally tend to be pretty white, and this was an opportunity to help them see through a play that was filled with authenticity who they are, holding a mirror up to what it's like to be a white person in the US and not have to be responsible for the things that you say. Isaac is able to do this sort of magic act of both treating the single character who is a person of color in the play with total authenticity, and also do it for all of the white people in the play, so that, as some other people have said, they are real people, three-dimensional characters who have flaws, but also have things about them that are recognizable and that you can have empathy with. So that was why I really wanted to be involved with this after I read the play, was to take the opportunity to bring it to white people, to help them see through the power of live performance what they're like, what we're like.
No, thank you. Thank you so much for that, Sam. And I think it's actually a great segue into looking at this play and now moving us into talking a little bit about how directly it relates to Pittsburgh. So I think that's something that all of us have had separate conversations. You know, it may be set in Elkhorn, Wisconsin, a tiny town, but as Isaac shared at first rehearsal, a story about kind of his first encounters in Pittsburgh. I think it's also very much about the community and the moment that we're experiencing. So, I wanted to do two things. One, would love to hear from our attendees, any listeners, if you also had responses to the play that we can, incorporate into this, so it is a true community conversation. We're able to have a dialogue. But I think I just want to throw that out there to all of our panelists. Like, how have you seen PERKUP PERKUP reflected in Pittsburgh?
I think the type of microaggressions in PERKUP PERKUP and the specific language between the white characters is really kind of the way that it is here in Pittsburgh. Like that the kind of willful ignorance, I think, is the same type of willful ignorance that you might find in the more shady sides of Pittsburgh. Racist sides. Not shady side specific.
I teach at a charter school. I had a white fourth grader, little 9-year-old girl, another black woman walked into the room. She goes, "Is that your sister?" So I got a microaggression from a 9-year-old, and I was like, Jesus, help me. I had a student, a black student, like the school that I teach at is predominantly white. I had a white student say to another black student, both 8th graders, "Do you have Ebola? You come from Africa, you must have Ebola." I had another student, like they were playing around, kids like, "Give me back my phone." And he's like, "No, you F." And she was like, "Are you seriously going to call me that?" And he was like, "Well, at least I didn't call you the N-word." So like, this is stuff that happens, and these are students that I encounter with, and they're getting this regression day in and day out. So yeah, you don't have to go to Wisconsin. Pittsburgh, the most livable city in the world. Like it's here at our doorstep, and younger kids are experiencing it every day.
I want to add to that. There's this interesting topic of, so I watch stand-up comedy all the time. I love stand-up comedy. And I don't remember who made the joke, but somewhere along the line, there was a joke about Southern racism and Northern racism. And the way they describe Northern racism is exactly how it is in Pittsburgh. It's like, it's not like in your face, it's covert, it's like, you don't know that the people in the room despise your presence, but you can feel it. And it's like, you don't feel it enough to be like, this person definitely hates me. It's always a question of, does this person hate me? Like, what's going on here? If I had to make this discussion specific to a situation I was in, so when I was in college, I was that kid who would, show up with my hood on just like this, sat in the back of the class, and sometimes I would come in. There was one class, every time I came in, I was extremely tired. But I also felt like I didn't need this class, so I fell asleep all the time. And that teacher ended up being the theater coach, and I was a theater kid. So one day I went to his theater class. He was surprised to see me at first. He was, of course, he's a white male. He was surprised to see me there. You could tell it all over his face. Then one night he drives me home and he tells me straight up, he's like, "Hey, the reason I was surprised to see you today is because I see you in my class with your hood on, sleep all the time. I thought you were one of those slackers. I didn't think that, he expressed in that moment that he didn't think there could be more to me than just that slacker, And it was just like interesting because a lot of people think this and never say it. Everywhere in Pittsburgh, he's the only person to ever flat out say it in my 23 years of living in Pittsburgh.
Thank you all for sharing all of that. I just wanted to add to it the other side of like the willful ignorance, or like the helpful approach, which I've heard and seen a lot, stories that still shock me, and definitely when I share it with friends outside of Pittsburgh, it doesn't feel like it's happening in other places. So like a friend of mine who wasn't born here and has an accent because she's multilingual. And in Pittsburgh, this is the place where she had been told multiple times that she really should, get rid of that accent if she wants, to grow. Or the level of tokenism that I feel that happens, where you have like, and I'm probably guilty of being one of the tokens. So to me, it's also like a constant reminder of how are we making sure we're creating space for others, because it just feels like it happens such a go-to here. Where it's like the one Latino, the one Black American, the one this, and people just revert to that ignorance, microaggression. I don't know.
Oh, thank you, Betty. And I also want to shout out to our attendees. Bridget asked a great question. If you want to jump into the chat function and share microaggressions you've seen, witnessed, or even been part of within Pittsburgh, it's really wonderful for us to be able to hear from you as well. But I don't know if Mark, Bridget, Lisa, or Sam, if there anything else that kind of struck you of like how this feels like it's so relevant, to Pittsburgh.
I was seeing all your faces, very appreciative of the fact that our first read through of this play as a cast was the only time we actually had an audience. And the way that the room responded to hearing it out loud was very informative for those of us who wondered how these moments were going to land and how people would perceive them. And I'm longing for the time when this play gets a broader live audience, because I think it's in the interactions among people who are not all the same where the theater can really have its power, because we can talk to ourselves and we can examine our own place in this world and the way we encounter others, but it's through empathy and it's through interactions with people who are not exactly like us that we hope to affect some very small modicum of change. And understanding maybe is a better way to put it, where we can perceive others' reactions by the way they vocally respond. The play had a number of readings and workshops leading up to our rehearsal period, and there were discussions after some of those workshops, and the discussions revealed many different responses to the play from people depending on what their background was and where they were from. And art is always like that. But in a play like this, which deals with race in such an overt way, I think it's a missed opportunity that I'm both appreciative for the chance to work on it in the way that we did, but regretful that we couldn't take it all the way to a full audience and a longer discussion.
To something that Trouble said really stuck with me in saying that professor, after he like drove you home, that's when he told you that he was a slacker. And I feel like there's sometimes these moments whenever people who aren't people of color, white people, will once they feel a certain level of comfort, then sometimes, you know what I mean, there's those moments then that kind of, and you're like, oh, this is really what you thought about me from jump. And that's yeah, that's just like a whole thing. And just looking at Taylor's comment, I totally understand that and being there. And I think what's really difficult too is whenever there is somebody who is genuinely trying to have a conversation, but saying all of the wrong things, and just like that really tension building like space. And what's so difficult about that too was like we want to be able to have those conversations and engage, but I feel like sometimes there's a lot of like white fragility or white distance where like white people don't even want to engage in the conversation that is so necessary to affect change. But then whenever they engage in the conversation and then do those oops or those missteps, there's so much animosity towards it because it's like the 90,000th microaggression or whatever that, you know what I mean, everybody else is coming in at. So yeah, I totally empathize with that situation, Taylor.
Same. And I think that it's also, it gets weird for people of color in those situations too, because we want to have those conversations, but it gets so exhausting. And I feel like it gets so exhausting so quickly because we experience it so much at varied levels. And then when sometimes you're afraid of getting to that point in the conversation where yes, racial fatigue, you get to that point where you feel like you're not getting through to the person you're talking to sometimes, and you're like afraid to hit that wall where you're just like, okay, you're a person who doesn't get it, and you're saying that you want to get it, but you're not willing to do the work to understand as far as you can understand. And it's hard to find a difference between someone who is really willing to go there and do the work and cry and understand or whatever needs to happen to get there versus someone who is trolling or is just wants to seem like they're not as racist as they are or is in denial with themselves, as one of the characters in PERKUP PERKUP is. And that gets difficult too. Oh, we got another comment.
No, I think that's actually, it's a really great sort of tie into to what you were just saying. So the comment that one of our attendees identified most with Eric. So I'll actually go ahead and read this. I think not all of our attendees can see this. So I identified with Eric in the play as a white woman who's on a journey to try and be an anti-racist. It was easy to be critical of other characters and their comments, and I was convicted by what happened with Eric at the end of the play. Hard to hear what Pedro had to say, but important for me to hear. Not a good question for all of you, but just an audience reaction. And I think that point of looking at that window of spectrum of where you are on a journey feels, incredibly relevant to, to this place and how it's addressing, where folks are in their journey as part of the community. And I think it also ties into one of the things that we had, wanted to talk about today is not only how it ties in, to Pittsburgh, but in looking at the broader picture of acknowledging the systems of racism that are in place in this country, how it speaks particularly to this current moment, and to the disproportionate effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on minority populations in this country. And so take a moment to also kind of look at that. So we just kind of want to also weave that into our conversation if there are anything that come up to any of our panelists or questions that our attendees might have kind of related to that topic.
I can jump in on that one. Because One HUD is actually working directly with informing the Black community on everything they need to know about COVID-19. We started this weekly forum that we call Town Hall Tuesdays, where we speak to community members and we invite, panelists on to the live. It's on Facebook, of course. And these panelists usually share information that we feel Black people need to know, because when you look at the statistics, Black people are disproportionately affected because of lack of health care, lack of access to a lot of things. And I want to, take it broader than COVID and back to PERKUP PERKUP. One thing I would say that sucks about what's true in this play is that, like, these microaggressions, so if we're being completely honest, they usually come from a group of people that everyone who does not identify, so everyone who doesn't identify as Black, they want to be like white people in America. When they think of freedom, when they think of, wealth and stuff like that, they think of white people in America. So when people are growing up seeing, the people that they want to be like treat a certain group of people certain ways, they then start treating that group the same exact way, and it creates this whole trickle down effect where we get like the worst end of the stick, because everyone trying to be like, the people who are originally oppressing us are also joining into the oppression. So much so that even our own people do it, Like there was this one time I was on a bus and someone walked by me smelling super strongly like weed. And so I go straight to the back of the bus, and the bus driver is Black. She stops the bus abruptly and she's just like, "Get off the bus," talking to me. I'm like, "Why?" She's like, "I see you rolling up weed." I showed her my hands. I'm like, "I don't know what you're talking about." All of these people on the bus, and she looks directly at me. One of the only, people of my skin tone on the bus. And I was like, "This is crazy." I didn't want to be no snitch, but I was just like, if only you knew who actually smelled like weed. It sucked.
I thought I would, if I may pose a question, because something that, that comes up in the play, and then something I've known that happens in conversations is sometimes, a lot of times, for white people, defensiveness comes up when engaging in conversation. "Oh no, I didn't mean that. Oh no, that's not me." And then the other thing that comes up is even remotely trying to relate, to say, "Oh, I had, that happened to me when XYZ." And, I think I guess I just pose it as just another form of, they seem small as I write it down on paper, but I feel that in terms of furthering equity, that they don't help. I suppose I just throw that up as just a thought, that as we're talking, this is something that I'm wondering, maybe it came up because of a conversation Isaac talked about with One Talk Back. So as an audience member, maybe it's for the audience that's here, that's listening, if you find that in yourselves or seen that, or I'm sure in the panelists too.
Yeah, and I think the leap in that story was, right, the audience member was uncomfortable. It was a white audience member, and they were uncomfortable about it, and they thought it misrepresented them, and all of the go-to defensiveness. But to your point, if we can lean into the fact that if you're uncomfortable, that means that there's a reason for it, and like lean into that and sit with it and don't fill up the space. And like, it's hard, but it's necessary.
I agree, and I think sorry. But I think you're absolutely right in saying that is not that defensiveness isn't helpful in the conversation, because once you kind of start building those bricks, there's no space for understanding to get in. And we have to be able to listen to each other in order to really have these conversations in a way that's going to help progress us as a people.
Mhm.
Yeah, I want to speak to the uncomfortable part. I was literally just having a conversation about this with my girlfriend, and we were like reflecting on something that helps to keep our relationship from being so tense and easygoing. And one of those things is our willingness to face what's uncomfortable in the moment. You know, it's like when she does something that makes me feel a certain way, even though it's uncomfortable to talk about, I'll take a moment and express my feelings in a way that's like, hey, I'm not saying you're a terrible person for this, but I noticed this and it made me feel this way. Let's talk about it, you know? And I feel like as far as it goes for, white people, I feel like that is what's necessary when it comes to like fixing the relations and making sure that we can work together as a team, is like being able to do the work even when it's uncomfortable, you know? And like the work sometimes isn't just, activism and trying to speak against the issue. The work is also within. You feel me? If we're not doing the work within first, and it's hard for us to band together and do the work as a unit, because every part of that unit has to be, equally as strong or working on strengthening each part.
No, thank you so much for that, Treble. And I think it actually leads us into a really interesting point, because as we were talking and sort of theorizing about building this experience, is talking about how to have the conversation, but also ways to take action within our community. So I think I want to turn this over now to all of the panelists, to say, what are some of the resources that you use that you found useful in beginning anti-racism work and organizations to get involved with in Pittsburgh? And I'll say, one thing that City's been able to provide is that we have a resource sheet that has ways to educate yourself as an audience member if you want to learn more about anti-racism work, as well as different organizations that we've worked with, and kind of just a start at looking at kind of what microaggressions are and possibilities of bystander intervention. And I also want to shout out to another one of the comments here, that we had someone say, that there are also gradations of privilege that this play explores. So exploring what it is to be a woman, and I think it's something that Isaac talked about, that we talked about a lot in rehearsal, the gradations of power in this play that play out in the dynamics of the women between Eric and Jeff and Vicky and Tori. So that's a great point, that there are many different facets of this kind of ladder of privilege. So a thank you to that. But I'll turn it over to the panel to talk about, what are ways to take action. And also for all of our listeners, feel free to comment if there are questions that you have too that you'd like us to address. Does anyone want to start? I know it's always hard, so maybe Betty and Bridget, to throw you in, because I know that you both have a lot of experience in this work and facilitating. Are there any organizations or kind of maybe recommended reading that you might have for attendees?
Sure. I think that some of the resources we were finding useful together as a team and preparing for this, and in general, are Ibram Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist, Damon Young, What Doesn't Kill You Makes You Blacker. There's so many Pittsburgh writers, producers of podcasts. Yeah, it's kind of endless. So what we sort of recommended was, as much as possible, of like using this time to read, listen to, watch, anything that you can get your sort of hands-on or earbuds plugged into of people of color nationally or within our city as well. Also just showing up in cross-racial spaces, showing up to even just listen, to hear like what conversations are happening, to be a part, to be present, to engage in conversations with people that you trust and care about, to, you know, start exploring your own identity, your own story, your own actions, your own behaviors. Those are some of just a few sort of stepping stones. And Betty, you want to add?
Yeah, no, I would say I think that we all get like stumped on the question because there's so many resources, and it's not a lack of resources or places to show up. You know, I used to go to Kelly Strayhorn all the time and love the work that Janera Solomon did there, and I'm excited to see where things go next, and the work that you've been doing. Obviously, City, the productions that you bring, everything that One Hood does, and I'm excited, to be here with Alumni Theater Company as well and what they're doing. So there are great organizations locally that you could be paying attention and show up and go to their events. But you have to be willing, as one of the panelists said before, you have to be willing to do the work. Like, it's not just like, let me ask a person of color all of the questions and have them like impose or impart their wisdom onto me. That's not doing the work. So it is showing up to these places. It is finding out the resources and reading them and processing them. And I think the importance of, like Bridget said, showing up, and then, to be blunt, shutting up. So when I went to City of Asylum, Damon did his reading there, and it was tremendous, and he was awesome. And then, in like true to form, unfortunately, during one of the Q&A, a white woman started to relate to the story and share about her shared journey as it relates to Damon's, and it was her attempt to connect. So it's well-intended efforts, but again, the value of just like not trying to occupy that space, to really just be there and listen and take that step back, and that's as important.
So I don't have any resources to share, because like you said, there's a lot of them out there. But I do have a peace of mind to share. I was having this conversation. One of my best friends, she's a white woman, and I love her and her entire family. And one day I had a very long car ride with her mom, and we talked about some very interesting things. And one thing that I said to her was, don't clip our tails. And what that basically means is, like, if you're a white person doing work for, people of color and to try to help diminish the system, you want to keep in mind, don't clip our tails. A lot of times, white people think they're helping by telling us to neglect a part of our identity, to assimilate with the system. But it's like, no, it's like, if you really want to do the work, we have to make it so that we can exist as ourselves and be accepted as ourselves, and not feel like we have to neglect any part of ourselves when we're in a room. So don't clip our tails. Instead, make room for us to exist with our tails. That's my wisdom.
Thank you for the wisdom. I want to share another comment that I think is useful from an audience. So thank you for the conversation from Shannon. To say she attended a convening. Disappeared on me for a second. In Pittsburgh a few months ago about Pittsburgh Future, Pittsburgh Tomorrow, I believe it was called. It was a panel of all white. Apparently there was an ask for a person of color on the panel, but they were unavailable. The conversation was very related to education, medical fields, and technology, focused and leaned heavily white. A Black woman in the audience made a point that it was problematic having an all-white panel discussing Pittsburgh Tomorrow, and she was met with some defensive answers from the panel. It turns out that woman in the audience was the the wonderful artist Vanessa German is amazing, who also happened to be the closing act for the convening. She ended up leading an incredibly powerful audience participation poem and performance piece about what Pittsburgh tomorrow should be: inclusive, challenging, brave, and artistic. So thank you for sharing that. And I think that's also something that's a responsibility of organizations and programming, to think about how, who's part of the conversation. I think that's an incredibly powerful point, and something that's really important to look at in terms of programming and how we're creating a community that really is equitable.
I'd love to hear a response from any of the other white people in this panel. I just want to give space for, you know what I mean? I think because Blacks are so used to having this shared experience of microaggressions, we can sit in the barbershop and talk all day about what happened last week, last month, yesterday, as I was getting out of my Uber. But I would love to hear from, you know, the other panel and what like your responses are to all of this.
I'll just say that I can't directly experience the same things that you experience. I can become aware of them, you know, and it's a journey to do that sometimes, because it takes a kind of awareness that I'm not conditioned for. And I think part of my own personal work is to become more conditioned, you know, constantly to work on that. I'll just relay something that's happened recently. My girlfriend, Jenny Allen, started an anti-racist book club on Facebook and invited people to participate. And so it's about 10 books. We're doing one a month. She invited all of her friends and our friends on Facebook to join this book and to join this book club. And our friends who are people of color decided not to join the book club because it was sort of our work to do, you know, and so we're reading James Baldwin, we're reading a lot of these, you know, the same books that were mentioned earlier and some other ones, and having discussions among ourselves about our responses to this work as a way of starting to raise our own awareness and have conversations among ourselves about our own responsibility, culpability, our place in this journey, which is, you know, one of the things that I've realized recently is this journey is never over. You know, it's like success. You never become successful. Maybe you get better, maybe you don't, but it's the effort that counts. And so that's where I am on the journey. And I'm also, you know, leading an organization that is trying to become more aware. And it's the same thing there. You know, we're not interested in checking the box that we've done our EDI training and now we're done. We're thinking of it as a continuum and something that is ongoing for the foreseeable future, you know, and that's true for me personally, and I think it's also true for the organization. We have a long ways to go, and it's not going to be easy or pretty always. And the effort is what counts for us. For me, that's my perspective.
We only had a week together on this play. And I feel that there's a fire under me. I feel that there's been a fire under me for some time. I was first made aware, I don't know if everyone remembers when the Women's March was happening and the Intersectional March was happening, and I was living in East Liberty, and I went, whoa, what's going on? And sad to say that was a little late in life to have a woke moment of that kind. And whereas I attended on the outskirts, the Intersectional March, you know, it was like, okay, did that. So to call myself out on the inaction that I've done, even though my heart is a lover of all humans. So prior to PERKUP, I've been working, as it's been said, on myself. And then after PERKUP, it's been even more so. And what was really interesting as an actor, being in that room where there were 4 people, white people, right? 4, 3, I can't remember anymore. There goes my brain. 4 people and 1 person of color. And that's an extraordinarily, can be an extraordinarily tense room to be in. And I want to thank Betty and Bridget for being there and helping guide the conversations when need be. Having those words said out loud with everyone there as the audience, it made me realize how important these stories are, that these voices need to be heard, that these stories need to be heard, because there's still a ton of misinformation out there. The media is still not doing their job in advocating for Black communities. To say, I had a conversation with a family member, sorry, I'm rambling for 1 second, but I was asked how I was changed by this. And it feels like there's been a magnifying glass constantly, like I'm wearing goggles, and it's great. But I'm also really nervous talking right now. And I also feel for the audience, that's okay for you to hear that I'm nervous talking right now. That with COVID, that there's something with the Black population in their bodies that makes them more susceptible to the disease, which is just racism right there, and ignorance. So I am working hard to continue to educate myself and to continue to listen. I appreciate Bridget giving us space to speak on it. Of course, I feel like I just want to stay and listen. But I'm grateful. I really am grateful to be in this community in Pittsburgh in this time, and to be a part of this conversation, and to be an ally if I can.
Thank you.
And Lisa, I know I like low-key put you a little bit on the spot, but I appreciate, I was gonna say, like, I appreciate you and your honesty and your openness. And also too, like, you know, I was thinking when I was listening to the audio play and hearing you guys, like, and imagining y'all like jumping on tables and like singing and doing all of this and still knowing what's like coming on. And like, as an actor, I'm like, that's got to be a tough situation to be in. So like, I applaud Lisa and Sam for saying like, I'm going to embrace this role and dive in wholeheartedly, like, even though it scares people, because it would scare me. If I were white, it would scare me. So like, I get that. And I also want to say that, like, shout out in general to City Theater, because you guys are always doing amazing, bold work, and I think are a really good example of a white organization taking on anti-racist work in the city. And we need more white organizations prioritizing it, you know, not waiting till it's on their back door or until they have a relative now, but realizing that it's everybody's responsibility. So shout out to y'all.
A couple of things I wanted to say, listening to Mark talk about the book club was really interesting for me. I've been trying to figure out a way to say that when you're white, talking about race is something that you generally don't do around white people because nobody has to, and it turns just as defensive and ugly as it does when white people are trying to talk about race with Black people or any other people of color. So to be anti-racist in white spaces basically sets you up to be that guy. And if you're gonna be that guy, then you're gonna reap the whirlwind of being that guy in that space. Hearing about the book club made me think about how part of the job of anti-racism is creating opportunities with white people to talk to white people about race, because if you don't make the effort, then they're never going to talk about it, because it's too hard and we don't have to. And that's really what one of the reasons that I was so interested in working on this play, and one of the great tragedies of the coronavirus is that we didn't have a chance to bring it all the way to not just the people that I wanted to hear it, but as Mark said, to turn this into an opportunity for not just discussion, but an opportunity to be in a room experiencing the play with a lot of very diverse people, and to have that empathetic experience with a group of people that are not exactly like you, will be, when this play is finally produced, a very powerful experience.
I wanted to add one thing to that, kind of spinning off of Mark and Sam. And on a podcast that Betty and I recently did with Mark and Claire, talking about PERKUP as well, Mark, you said something about like what artists do and what artistic process is, which is that it's about like asking really good questions. And I just wanted to say that that was something for me that PERKUP did, and being a part of the process and watching how everyone was working, of like, wow, this is such an amazing way to learn how to ask really good questions about people. And I found us doing that. I mean, most of the characters in the play are white, and so we were asking a lot of questions about like, why is this person the way that they are? What's going on for them? What in their life or their experience like might have contributed to this behavior or action that they're doing? And I just kept thinking, like, as part of the anti-racist work, of like really engaging in empathetic dialogue with white people in my life who I may think like don't share views that I have now, and that I find it's like hard and I don't want to, and I just want to distance myself from them and make me like I am different from them, I am not that. And so I just kept thinking about like, what would it be like in my own life to apply this artistic process of trying to ask really good questions to understand people, and therefore to be able to find empathy for them and engage with them. And that's something that I feel like I'm holding on to from the play, and like the own work that I want to be doing with my engagement with loads of different people in my life.
Thank you, Bridget. And I think that the context and the richness of the characters in PERKUP, even though ultimately they do reprehensible things, really is part of the complexity of the play. And I think something that's important in nuanced conversations that I think often get lost on Facebook. You know, when it's just people shouting at each other, there's there's nothing, there's no nuance to that. You're not able to kind of have that. But I think it's also a great way to look as we start to wrap up. We wanted to do two things. One, to invite any of our attendees to share in the chat function. Betty, Bridget, and I were kind of talking through today and plotting this out, to invite attendees to share maybe one thing that they've taken away from the conversation or play and would like to bring and practice in their own life. So what's one small thing that you can do maybe in the next week, so to make it just a small manageable step, that's so important. And I think for any of our attendees, we'd love to hear that from you, so feel free to just type that into the comments in the chat field. And as you're kind of contemplating on this, I wanted to also make sure and close out with a little bit of art. So Treble had been gracious enough to also be open to sharing a spoken word piece. So we wanted to bring that moment, and then we'll kind of get a chance to share some final thoughts.
Did you want me to go now?
Yeah, let's go for it.
All right, okay. So, the poem that I have prepared, I wrote this a couple of years ago. It's called Roots. And it came from me reflecting on where I come from, figuratively and physically. I come from broken promised lands filled with self-hate and despair. I come from wastelands bearing with no hopes of repair. I come from too young to realize how much you should care. From mama being the only father figure there. I come from a concrete jungle, filled with the squealing of pigs, baking shell casings, filled with the rain of hell breaking loose from beneath the ground, filled with people lying down hoping that white Jesus will feed us, filled with the elephant in the room, that there's so much room for improvement, filled with the silence of lambs afraid to be consumed by the life around them, filled with the pattern of monkeying around with toy guns for fun until that gun becomes real and a mother loses her son because someone somewhere feels as though there's a war to be won, so it saved game's life for the price of one. I come from what others would name nothing, because we were taught nothing but to steal, nothing but to kill, nothing but to live is not in our will, nothing but that life is but a wheel turned by the hands of shoes we cannot fill, nothing but that violence comes with this thrill that makes the cold-blooded street life kind of give you chills, nothing but that we should pop pistols like pills to fix our biggest issue, which is the ones with the same dark tissue, nothing but that every black male is out to get you, nothing but that you should hit him before he hits you, nothing but that cops are entitled to steal your innocence if the description fits you, because they're not what's wrong with this country, it's you. I come from roots that dig deep but were cut at the neck. I come from where black pride and internalized racism intersect. I come from a tribe that values a higher respect, so much so that they'll take lives for a check because acquisition is the only thing respected in the streets. I come from where discipline means to be beat with a belt across your butt with your pants at your feet, where you can't cry when you feel the rise of defeat, so you're taught to hide those emotions discreet. I come from a place I'll always thank for insight, because without it, I would have never known how much my brother doesn't value his life, how much a man doesn't value his wife, or how much pretty much all we're taught in this life is fight. I come from a place where self-love is foreign, where knowledge is boring, where the reign of white supremacy culture is storming, and the deprecation of an entire race is swarming. And the saddest part about where I come from is that all of this is just another norm to be a target from the moment you were born. Roots. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you all for listening. Thank you.
That was so wonderful. Thank you so much, Treble, for that, and to all of our panelists. Thank you also to our attendees. This just has been really wonderful. I'm going to work to compile all of the resources that everyone has shared, so when we're able to post this video afterwards, we'll be able to share those as well. Just want to leave one moment of space in case there are any other closing thoughts from any of our panelists. And just also thank you to everyone who's been posting and watching along with us. It means a lot that we're able to engage in this moment and to be present and to carry on the spirit of Isaac's words so that they reach a broader audience.
I just want to say the arts are everything, and Shakara and Treble so brought that to life in this gathering, and I can't wait to be live and in person again soon and fighting to get this production on the stage.
Thank you all for your participation and for your humanity and in going with us on this journey. It's deeply appreciated.
I wanted to say that thank you to Claire and everyone who's here, and for having me here today, and Trouble for that piece that just, you see me over here crying. I'm not scared to cry. I just wanted to say to everyone who's watching that it's really our duty to love one another, to be there for one another, and to recognize the humanity in one another. And if you do not take that time to see that, we're never gonna move forward and be any kind of joint people. We're never gonna get past all of these issues that are tearing us apart. We have to see each other and see our differences as gifts and as learning experiences, because that's what they are and that's what they should be. That's all. Thank you.
I wanted to say thank you all for your comments and, your praise on the poem. That was a hard one. I don't know if you noticed, my voice started trembling at a point in time. But I want to leave you all with this think piece. I've learned along my journey of, self-growth and healing that a lot of our behaviors stem from what we believe. And one thing that's important to note as we all do the work as a unit is that we are still living in a country that once believed Black people to be 3/5 of a man. So, and I feel like a part of our society still believes that to this day, that Black people, period, aren't completely human. And you see that by the way that we're depicted in the media. You see that by how people talk about us, in the judicial system, in the business realm, all over the place. So it's like one thing as individual parts of, one united whole, we all have to make sure that when we enter a space that we're checking what we believe about the situation, the space, and the people in that space. If we check what we believe at the door, then we can identify the humanity in all people, Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, whatever color or creed. Make sure you're always checking your belief before you act and before you speak. And thank you for hearing me speak. I appreciate your time, energy, and, never lose sight, NLS.
Well, thank you to all of our panelists. This has just been really special, and I think meant a huge deal to the entire City Theater family for being a part of this, for being able to spend an evening with all of you. And thank you to all of our attendees. We'll be sharing this archival video, so there are ways that if someone missed out on the conversation and they want to engage, they can. And we hope that everyone listening to our panel and this entire digital community at the moment, that you all stay safe, healthy, happy, and that we look forward to being able to do this in person sometime soon. So thank you all so much. We'll say good night. Lots of love.